What do you do when your faith system no longer fits? Because sometimes you outgrow it. Sometimes you graduate, you ascend. You leave the old, itchy, worn-out way and you begin to walk in the new. Sometimes you grow. Join the conversation with me, Tony Werfel, author, speaker, teaching pastor, as we help unwrap and rebuild a faith that no longer fits. We learn to walk into the new, messy journey called life. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Faith Undone, where we learn to deconstruct and then reconstruct, reframe a faith that works for us. And so today I want to do some interesting things with a verse. But before I do, let me just say this. I've had a lot of fun. Every chance I get, I'm talking to people and just sharing what I'm doing, what this deconstruction looks like. And I'm realizing there's actually a lot of us out there. And I know for many of us, we feel sometimes alone. For many of us, we feel like, am I crazy? Am I the only one that's going through this? Because when you look at like the churches or even like your family or your friends, no one else seems to be doing this. And so there's a very real feeling of just kind of loneliness. And this weekend, I had a moment where I met this tattoo artist, just a couple storefronts down from where we're meeting for Ethos. And I'm talking to him, and he shares with me, you know what, I'm in that same space. And as I'm leaving, he even says to me, it's so good to know that I'm not crazy. And so all of my friends out there who are deconstructing, who are just kind of reframing things, and the sweater doesn't fit, I want to first start off by just saying it's okay and you're not alone. It's okay, you're not alone, you haven't actually gone crazy. And so today I want to look at a verse. It's a very popular one. And it's one that people use, and I would say they actually use it in a really messed up way. The verse has been sabotaged. I'll just say that. The verse has been really sabotaged. And so here's the verse. It goes like this. It's from Paul, and it's in 2 Corinthians 5:21. And it says this: "For our sake he became sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God." And so some of you, I know you're thinking, yeah, definitely heard that one. But the question, of course, is what does it mean? Because if we're going to be honest, every single verse that we look at, it's being interpreted. And I'll oftentimes have people say, well, it doesn't mean that. Like, who are you to say it doesn't mean this anymore? And I'll just say, well, what does it mean to you? And what oftentimes happens, the person will essentially begin to answer these questions. I'll ask them, where did that come from? How did you arrive at this place where that word and this phrase meant that thing? And before you know it, they'll finally admit, well, I just was told. And who were you told by? Well, you were told by this person who adopted that interpretation. And where did that interpretation come from? Most of the time, it came from a tradition. And so here we go. Questions I might ask of this verse in 2 Corinthians, this he who knew no sin became sin. I might ask some simple questions like this. What does it mean to become sin? What does that even mean? Jesus became sin. Like sin is some weird abstract stain that you have. Like, oh no, I have the sin. Someone coughed on me. I have the sin, right? What does that even mean? Like, I became sin. Jesus literally becomes some stain? Or he somehow like takes on the mistakes you did? Like, what does that mean? How does that even like play out? So if sin is literally, I'm looking at the verse now, if sin is truly like the literal mistake you made, then Jesus somehow takes your mistakes. Have you ever taken someone's mistakes as your own? Like, what does that look like? What does that even mean? I take on your mistakes. You take on my mistakes. I somehow wear them. Your mistakes are somehow placed on someone else. It doesn't actually make a lot of sense when you begin to think about it. Because for many of us, we begin falling back into that whole original sin idea. Again, original sin, I would say, is what really has sabotaged the whole thing. It's really sabotaged the whole way we view the story, the Bible, how we even view like Jesus, the cross. I would even say the divine. It really has messed up a lot of stuff. And so original sin, one of my favorite writers actually says this because, again, think about original sin. We are stained because someone ate the wrong produce. Now God needs a murder to take place in order for us to be somehow pure again, for him to accept us because we're a problem to the divine. That doesn't make sense. None of us would say we need a murder for things to be okay, unless we were someone that just needed revenge. And if your God needs revenge, that's not much of a loving God, is it? So the whole original sin idea, Augustine's original sin idea in 300 AD, it actually falls apart. One of my favorite writers, she says this, Danielle Shroyer. She wrote this book called Original Blessing. Please pick it up, read it. Really interesting. She says in this interview about the book, she says this, it's fair to say Augustine popularized this idea. And by the time of the Reformation, it became widespread in the West. While the early church talked about sin as an action or an illness, did you catch that? Augustine and others shifted language to an inborn sin nature. Once that happened, all the theological focus went toward trying to fix the problem of sin. The cross was seen differently then. And so salvation became primarily about sin management. And human bodies became suspect, and on and on. So I think you understand what she's saying. Basically, the idea is simply not anywhere in the Old Testament will you find original sin. Paul isn't referring to any of this when he's talking or when he's writing these proof texts that have been used for original sin. It's just not there. It's a crazy idea. And it's actually really been gross for our culture because it becomes all about how do I become perfect, this static state of being perfect enough to be saved by this God up there somewhere. It's just a really gross idea. Another thing about this whole idea of original sin and like taking this literally is that it wasn't intended to be literal. The word, the idea here, he becomes sin, it was actually more metaphorical. And so when you take a literal thing, when you take a metaphorical thing and you try to make it literal, it gets a little bit weird. So think about this. Jesus took your sin, took your mistakes. How does that work? Again, I've never seen this done because my mistakes are actions in the past that happened. So does Jesus somehow erase my memory when I do bad things and I pray to Jesus, please take my sin? If we're going to be honest, the memories are still there. The thing happened. What should be taking place, if I'm going to be honest and be a human being, is that I should learn from my mistakes. I shouldn't just somehow cast them off. And so please understand, the whole idea, it's really wacky. Like it's a really weird idea to say, my sin is somehow gone, my mistakes, my actions. And again, interestingly enough, the action of giving away our sin onto someone else, to put all my mistakes on someone else, we would say that's not healthy. That's actually passive aggressive. In our culture today, if I say to someone, look, I'm angry with you, I'm going to take all of my anger and my frustration, all my mistakes, I'm going to put them on you, you would say, Tony, you are in unhealth. Like that's not a healthy way of living. That's actually what the ancients called scapegoating. To put all of my issues on someone else. Well, basically what I'm doing then is I'm not actually having to deal with my own issues. I'm just simply putting it, scapegoating on someone else. And so if the cross is for many people what we've been taught from tradition since 300 AD, it's just simply this thing that we put our issues, our mistakes, our stuff onto Jesus, he takes care of it, then I'll never actually grow. It's actually a really destructive idea. And so I would say this verse in 2 Corinthians, it's not referring to original sin. It's not referring to this weird, wacky idea of somehow Jesus taking on mistakes and all of that. It's something actually way deeper. And so let me just go through it again with you. The word here, he became sin. The word in the Hebrew, the idea of sin, it actually means like it's a mistake. It's going the wrong direction. That's what sin meant as a verb. It's just going the wrong direction. And then in the Greek, which is where this is in the New Testament, 2 Corinthians, this is a letter from Paul to a bunch of people who are struggling to get along. The word sin here means it's you're missing the mark. There's this thing that's going to bring life, and you choose to go the wrong way. Again, they're very similar. So sin is, in the majority of times, it's a verb, right? So here's what you don't know, or many of us don't even think about. For that culture, the word sin actually meant something to the Jewish people who actually wrote this book. So sin, as a verb, we already understand that it's going the wrong direction. But there is a noun form, sinner. And so sinner is actually a label that was put on a group of people. So start thinking that one through. Jesus became sin, a noun. So for the Jewish people, a sinner, sin is a noun. It actually was a reference to a group of people. And so if you're Jewish, you believe you have you're in the inn. You are the remnant. You are the chosen people by God. You are the blessed people, which means everyone else is not. There's a group of people going around saying anyone who's not part of our tribe is an infidel, right? And so for the Jewish people, everyone who is not us, who's not part of an elect group, who doesn't seem to be on the inn, who doesn't have Torah, who's not keeping all these different religious rules, regulations, if you're not in, you are a sinner, right? So you're a sinner. If you're a widow, an orphan, a foreigner, a Roman, you are a sinner. And so when you see this verse there, for our sake, 2 Corinthians 5:21, for our sake he became sin, who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. I want you to see something really deep here. Again, for the Hebrew people, this Jewish group of people, everyone else is a sinner. Everyone else has missed the mark. Everyone else is wrong. We're the in. Jesus was born a Jew, right? Jesus was not some American toting a bunch of guns and whatever. That's American Jesus. That's the one many of us grew up with. That's my homeboy Jesus. But that's not the Jesus of the first century. The first century Jesus was a Jew. He was part of the inn. And so again, the noun that is referring to sin, it actually means the rest of us who are not Jewish. It's all of us. It's the rest of us. So what Jesus does is he sits at the table with sinners. He joins sinners. He heals sinners. He welcomes sinners in. These are all phrases found in the New Testament. Jesus becomes a infidel. Jesus becomes a sinner. Jesus becomes one of us. So essentially what you have is Jesus, who is part of the in crowd, a Jew, he chooses to lose his Jewishness, right? He leaves the in crowd to become part of the sinners. And that means something. Jesus, who was the in, becomes the outcast. All so that we might experience something beautiful. And the word here, it says, he becomes the righteousness of God. And people have asked me, well, what does that mean then? So this word righteousness, it means this. It means justice and generosity. Justice and generosity. So think about this. If you are part of the outcasts, if you're one of the people who are on the out, you don't fit in. Jesus comes in and says, in order to bring justice, restoration, repair, they have a word for this. They say tikkun olam, which means there's healing all over. Shalom, nothing missing, nothing broken. In order to bring justice to the world, which is how the Jews saw themselves, by the way, people who would bring peace to the world. If you want to bring this to the world, you have to be willing to become an outcast too. You have to be willing to sit with sinners, to become one of them, to become the outcast. And again, sinner, the marginalized, the oppressed. This is what Jesus does. And when you get that, you become the generous gift right? Righteousness, generous. You become the generous gift to the world. You become the generous gift. You become the thing that brings life to the world. And that's what this verse means. Nothing about original sin, nothing that you're some evil sinner and now there needs to be a murder in order to take care of everything. Not that Jesus literally takes on like your mistakes. That's just weird, doesn't really make sense. And I don't care. I'll have so many people say to me, oh, well, you just have to trust. Like you just have to believe. Believe what? A tradition and interpretation that wasn't actually what the original writers meant? No, that doesn't make sense. This idea of original sin placed on that text, it really messes stuff up. It screws up the beauty of what's going on here. And again, the beauty of the text is simple. It's that Jesus becomes one of us to show the generous gift of life that the divine wants to impart on everybody. When you choose to participate in love and equality around a table, that's when you experience the kingdom of heaven Jesus spoke of, the thing that brings life and beauty and justice to the world. And he says, everyone's invited in. And Jewish people, if you're not willing to step into space with other people who have been marginalized and oppressed, you will never experience it either. And so today, anyone who is feeling like you're on the out, anyone who's feeling like, I feel like I'm going crazy, am I the only one? I want you to know this. He became one of us so that we might experience the generous gift. And that's our call. My hope is that you might go out and you might experience this with others too. You might start these conversations with other people who have been pushed out, who are not feeling part of the inn. Other people who are having these conversations, find time for them. And when you do, you will be a part of the generous gift. I hope that shored up this idea for you of 2 Corinthians, because it's actually a really beautiful verse. Anyways, folks, I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you next week. And as always, please join me on patreon.com/Tony Werfel. And again, that helps us be able to put out more of these podcasts, more of these videos, and it also will help you engage in this process of me writing this book, Faith Undone, Losing Your Religion, Finding Your Soul. So again, please get on there, donate to that. It would be super helpful to keep this thing going because I know it's making a difference.